Hi, everyone. Harry here to talk about a new lawsuit filed by House Democrats, many of them, about a dozen, against ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, growing out of the visible scrum that you may recall took place in New Jersey when people showed up to do as the law entitles them to do and requires them to be permitted to do unannounced visits as part of their oversight responsibilities of immigration facilities. And that was the whole crazy kind of push and shove of a crowd that you'll recall. They wound up dubiously arresting the mayor of Newark and let those charges go, and then did arrest on federal charges a member of New Jersey's congressional delegation, Representative MacIver, who was just in the middle of a whole sort of push and pull with agents, and it's really kind of overreaching charges for, basically her getting pushed around and pushing back, etc. I don't think that case is gonna possibly succeed. Nevertheless, that's the scrum we're talking about. And so in the wake of it, ICE has issued new guidance for the visits by members of Congress as part of, again, their legal oversight responsibilities, and that includes specifically year in, year out. In fact, there's a provision in the enabling legislation that says that ICE can't use any money at all in a way to impede Congress's ability to do this oversight. But ICE has just on its own issued this new policy that says, first, if you want to visit, we need a week notice. And second, you can't visit field offices, so-called administrative offices, at all. As to the first provision, you can imagine the difference between a regime in any industry or place where inspections take place between having a week notice or not. It's the difference between being able to cover up and cleanse any sorts of violations and not. And certainly ICE, from all we've learned, would be very, I think, would take it as an opportunity with their week's notice to clean up the joint and keep it from being the sort of what has appeared to be in some inspections that members of the House have undertaken, a real sort of deplorable conditions. Okay, and then the field offices, the little trick here is they're not just paper pushers. They actually have been housing detainees there. So if you want to see how detainees are treated, you've got to be able to look at the field offices. And it's really just an effort to create a enforcement-free zone by misusing the offices. So it's a very strong suit. Generally, the law says you cannot do this, and they're just doing it anyway. This is not the first time, not the 12th time that we've seen this out of the Trump administration, just ignoring the law. So 12 or so Democrats come in with a long lawsuit, with saying, first, you did this arbitrarily and capriciously. That's the Administrative Procedures Act. And second, it's ultra vires. And third, this is, Congress's responsibility. And there's no authority to the same old, but as applied to this one-sided change of policy that is obviously designed to defeat effective oversight. Now, the administration's claim on this is as follows. Well, we need to do this, they say. Well, first, the spokesman for Homeland Security says these members of Congress could have just scheduled a time for a tour. Instead, they're just running to court to drive clicks and fundraising emails. So they could have just scheduled a time under our new rules. Yeah, they could have, but then they wouldn't have been able to do effective oversight. But then here's the reason we have to do it, says the Department of Homeland Security, in order to protect President Trump's constitutional authority to carry out immigration policy. Huh? What's that? So if you think about that for a moment, what they're saying is he's got the Article 2 constitutional authority to do whatever he wants and have any kind of nasty conditions without oversight from Congress. The mere fact that Congress is looking to see that they're complying with the law is a imposition on his constitutional authority. If they run that argument and if anyone bites on it at all in the courts, that's just a total demolition job on congressional oversight. It's remarkable. You cannot do this, or we have the conditions, and you can't come in the field offices because of his constitutional. And they have a follow-up argument to protect ICE employees from assaults, disruptions, and obstructions to enforcement. Again, we are talking about members of Congress here. The scrum that we saw in New Jersey was playing out in public, where there were people in public protesting and the like. But the reason it played out there is because the ICE people wouldn't let MacGyver and the mayor of Newark, Res Baraka, in, and that's where it all was, going down. But the notion that you need to have a week's notice. They can come in, but you need a week's notice. What's that mean? You're going to be armed or whatever to protect ICE employees. I mean, it'll be interesting to see the discovery for that issue and see how they're trying to justify that you need to do this to members of Congress. Jamie Raskin and others, who's one of the plaintiffs and others, are going to just come in and assault ICE employees. It's ridiculous, but it's also so, disrespectful. The Dems who are doing lawful oversight in this view of things are really just there to obstruct and in order to fundraise and the like. Kind of ironic, given that, every little skirmish, Trump masterfully has sort of reinvented the art of turning around and shaking out more donations. So it's a really sort of one-sided and poorly argued policy on their part. Now, the one thing I want to mention, so first, how could the Dems lose? It would only be if some really expansive argument about executive authority takes hold, and we're in the same court that we often are, the D.C. District Court, but takes hold and somehow says that, Congress holds the purse strings. Congress has ordered this year in and year out, but somehow it violates to be able to do oversight. That's hard to see. But then the other thing to point out is when individual members of Congress are bringing lawsuits, there's always an issue of what's called in the law congressional standing. So typically an individual member of Congress can't simply sue to say, well, I voted for something, we lost, and the new law is wrong. It's really the body as a whole that has the right. So an individual who's in the process normally then can't bring it doesn't have standing to challenge. But this is different. These people and members of Congress all have individual responsibility and certainly prerogative to do these oversight inspections. They are critical. They're the sort of heart of the whole accountability and enforcement system. So Raskin and Dan Goldman and others personally have this right that's been denied them. So I think that ought to make out a solid claim of standing. We're the right people to be here suing. We're vindicating really our sort of personal rights as members of Congress to oversee, but that's always an issue where members of Congress sue. So there you have it. Dems individually saying you are keeping us from doing effective oversight, as surely they are, if you can't inspect places where detainees are held or you have to give a week notice. And we'll see how the administration responds if they try to argue standing or whatever. But it certainly looks like, once again, they've simply ignored the law, ignored Congress's clear prerogative and responsibility, with some free-floating claim about Article 2 that covers everything and defeats even the ability to do effective oversight. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.